Resolved accountability issues in relation to that story and that massacre must be addressed if efforts to build the rule of law in South Africa are to have genuine credibility. That's according to independent researcher and consultant David Bruce. His comments come as the country, of course, commemorates 10 years since that tragic incident, which claimed 44 lives in total. Bruce joins us now for more on this and his article. Mr. Bruce, thank you very much for speaking to us here on eNCA. Of course, I think what you say about accountability is quite important, because we did have a commission that spent about 150 million rand trying to find the answers, sent recommendations particularly to the NPA, but until today, none of those victims, the families of the victims, can point to justice.
Yes, that's right. So I think this is in many ways quite a difficult question, because on some levels what happened at Marikana was a profoundly complex event in various ways, not only because the massacre on the 16th was preceded by violence, but also because if one's talking about the possibility that there might be individual police shooters who were involved in criminal or allegedly wrongful actions on the day, it's probably formidably difficult to reconstruct and those cases and put together a viable and prosecutable case against many, if not virtually all of them. But there is, however, one action or set of actions which should arguably be a central focus of prosecution, and that would be the decision by the police leadership to launch the operation on the afternoon of the 16th of August, in circumstances when they knew it was highly likely that there was a strong possibility of significant bloodshed.
And Mr. Bruce, looking at the fact that during that time so much force was used, 33 out of the 34 miners being killed using an R5 rifle, something that, of course, is actually produced for warfare, not necessarily for situations such as that. And then you look at all the other protests that followed after that, where police force was in question. Where do you think South Africa is headed to if people who protest have to be scared of the police, and you're protesting because it's your right and you applied to protest?
Right, okay, well, we are talking about, in many ways, what are entirely different issues, because in many ways, the main problem at the moment is that rubber bullets are sometimes used in an indiscriminate way, and as illustrated, for instance, in the killing last year of Mthokozisi and Tumba. But arguably, if rubber bullets had been deployed and used, if the public order policing units had been deployed in an effective way at Marikana, one might have, not had the bloodbath that there was. Unfortunately, the situation is now that at least there seems to be a clear understanding within the police that these kinds of weapons, that are R5s at least, should not be used in crowd management. And so, insofar as the police continue to carry those weapons, it's understood that that is primarily for the purpose of being able to respond to situations where they're faced with, for instance, gangs who are also using equivalent types of weapons, such as AK-47s or R5s.
But also, Mr. Bruce, going back to the point of accountability, you saw, or rather South Africa saw, the then National Police Commissioner, Ria Piecha, falling on her sword. But a lot of people would say that, argued at the time and even today, that she was basically just used as a scapegoat, that the minister who was responsible for the ministry at the time, Nathi Mthethwa, for instance, your General Mbombo, who was commissioner at the time, and of course the General Naidu, who's actually also cited in the Farlam Commission's report to have actually possibly acted out of the law because he continued to fire even when he was told not to fire. So, you know, some people would say it's clear exactly who the NPA should go for, you know, in some instances, but they just won't.
Right, okay. Well, I think, yeah, there's a lot in your question, and it's difficult for me to respond to all the issues that you've raised. But essentially, what Ria Piega was never subjected to any kind of accountability process in relation to the Marikana Massacre itself. The board of inquiry that she faced was in relation to the allegations that she had been systematically dishonest in her evidence to the Marikana Commission. And there was a major problem of police dishonesty at the Commission, and in some ways the only accountability process that has taken place in relation to the dishonesty process of the SAPS at the Commission was the Board of Inquiry against Piega. However, in relation to the other aspects of accountability, what is always difficult is the question of to what degree are there viable, prosecutable cases. And I think, you know, what I've argued in an article that has been published by the ISS today is that, the principal case, which relates to what should in many ways be regarded as the major crime of Marikana, relates to the decision that was made by the provincial commissioner, the instruction that was given by her on the afternoon of the 16th of August for the operation against the strikers to be initiated in circumstances where this was likely, it was clearly understood that this was likely to lead to bloodshed.
And of course, in that particular article that you mentioned, you do make reference to Mbombo, who was the provincial commissioner at the time. And you say that although, she was provincial commissioner at the time, it was clear that she was acting because of possibly a more political instruction.
Yes, that's right. So, I think the most reasonable interpretation of what happened was that she was there was a meeting that happened the previous evening. It's generally agreed that is where a decision was made that the police should initiate an operation on the Thursday, and so Mbombo was acting in terms of an agreement that had been reached at a meeting the previous evening. However, considering the circumstances that she was faced with and the information that she had received from her senior commanders, that if they initiated the operation, that it would be likely to lead to bloodshed, she should have, gone back to her, for instance, the National Commissioner and motivated that the operation be delayed. And so she didn't do that. And, as
with 31 years experience, with 31 years experience as a police officer.
No, well, you see, the problem that comes in there is that in many ways she wasn't an experienced police officer. So it's a complicated situation because her experience in the police had been primarily in a sort of administrative and financial management roles. So she'd been appointed as the provincial commissioner without any actual notable policing operational experience. And she shouldn't have been in the position of being the senior person making decisions on the ground at Marikana on that day. And so, I would suggest that, that would be something that would need to be taken into account if, for instance, there were to be legal proceedings against her. But nevertheless, she was the person who issued the instruction, knowing that there was going to be bloodshed on that afternoon.
And just very quickly, Mr. Bruce, so you say that it's going to be difficult possibly for her to go through prosecution, but there's someone, for instance, as I mentioned earlier, who's mentioned in the Farlam Commission's report, a General Naidu, who was found, evidence was given to the commission saying that he firstly delayed the ambulances going to scene 1, where one of the miners was shot in the arm and later died because they lost too much blood because the ambulance took so long to get there. Then secondly, he's one of the officers who didn't cease fire when they shouted cease fire. So why do you think people like that who are mentioned in the report are not being prosecuted?
Right, okay. Well, you see, I mean, again, I don't exactly know what's happening within the NPA about these cases. What is always necessary is that the prosecuting authority has to assess to what degree any of these cases might be prosecutable. What seems to be clear is that the case has not been prioritized.
Yeah.
But what this also raises is the fact that the SAPS itself has never addressed the issues of internal accountability, which were raised by the Marikana Massacre. So there should be disciplinary processes which should have been implemented in relation to some of these issues, and basically the information indicates clearly that in relation to the events that took place at Marikana up to the 16th of August, there has never been any proper disciplinary process that has been implemented in that regard.
Yeah, and that's a shame, isn't it? Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mr. Bruce. That was independent researcher and consultant David Bruce.